Welcome to Surf Systems, a podcast where we dive into the stories, the legends, and the culture surrounding one of La Jolla's most iconic surf shops, Jolla Surf Systems. If you grew up surfing in San Diego, chances are you know about this place. Maybe you worked here, sold your boards here, picked up your first surfboard here, perhaps you were sponsored by the shop, or just hung around the shop. But more than just a retail space, Jolla Surf Systems was a gathering place, a hub of surf progression, a meeting ground for some of the most influential surfers and shapers, and a place where the next generation soaked up knowledge from those who came before them. The shop played a pivotal role in the surf history, carrying legendary brands, supporting rising talent, and helping to shape the culture of San Diego surfing. And while surf shops come and go, the stories, the history, and the impact of La Jolla Surf Systems deserves to be remembered and passed on. That's why we're here, to document the past before it fades, to highlight the influence on the present, and to keep the spirit of this shop alive. And what better way to start than with a true San Diego surfing icon? Our first guest is none other than Eric "Bird" Huffman, a guy who has dedicated his life to surfing, surfboards, and surf culture. Bird was the second manager of La Jolla Surf Systems in its early days, and since then, he's carved out a legendary place in the surf world. Today he runs Bird Surf Shed, a shop that's more like a museum, filled with historic boards hanging from the ceiling and a constant flow of surfers stopping in just to chat. If you've seen him featured in the Surfer's Journal or on American Pickers, you know Bird isn't just a shop owner. He's a walking encyclopedia of surf history, one of the most respected figures in the industry, and a guy who truly embodies what it means to be core. In this episode, we're going to talk about the early days of La Jolla Surf Systems, the characters who made it so special, and how those roots continue to influence the San Diego surf scene today. We want to give you a heads up. This first episode was recorded on an iPhone as a casual conversation between Bird and myself while sitting in the sand on a recent trip to Tavarua Island, looking out at the world-famous wave restaurants. The audio quality isn't perfect, but the stories and insights from Bird make it well worth the listen. I'm Brody, your host. I'm a current partner in La Jolla Surf Systems and working to keep the shop alive and in the family, quite literally. Bird actually introduced me to my wife, one of his distant cousins, and he even performed our wedding ceremony at Bird's Surf Shed. La Jolla Surf Systems is more than just a business. It's a community, a piece of surf history, and a place we're passionate about preserving. Without further ado, this is Surf Systems, where we dive into the systems behind the surf, and every board, every shop, and every surfer has a story. Good afternoon. We are coming to you live from Tavarua Island, and I'm here with Eric "Bird" Huffman, who's been a profound influence on my life and the lives of so many others. And we're here to talk about the history of La Jolla Surf Systems today. So, Bird has had a great relationship with all things surfing in Southern California and San Diego and across the world. And so we are excited to dig a little deeper into what makes La Jolla Surf Systems such a unique spot.
Multiple different reasons. You have to think back to when I started to work for them in the very early 80s. There were other surf shops around town, but there was nowhere like La Jolla Surf Systems. They were financed very well. Jeffrey Junkins, along with Helen Sully Jones, put the operation together. They had a decent budget. They had a killer location, which is still the original location where La Jolla Surf Systems is now. And I got recruited from another shop I'd worked at for 10 or 11 years. Opportunities arose. I needed to make a change in my life. And I went from basically grade school to college. And that's pretty much the best way I can equate it. Stepping into La Jolla Surf Systems, I was able to learn so much. I had the customer base down after 11, 12 years of working at the other spot. So I had good dealings with customers. I had good relationship, and I have just a natural way, as you'll hear, of just talking generally, openly. And that was fine. That makes for a good salesperson. Once I got down there, it was a whole nother world. because the other shop I had worked at, great reputation, but really, really low on product. You know, as time had developed, 70s turned into 80s, surfing went wampum. You got the big companies such as Billabong, you got the companies like Quicksilver, the big wetsuit companies, Rip Curl, O'Neill, Surfboard, Stussy, Fry, Castor, Nectar, Basel. I mean, the list goes on. We had Hobies, Phil Edwards models, all these things that I always wished that I could have presented to my customers at the other shop I was involved with. Now I had access to it, and I had to learn at a very quick pace on actually being a manager. It's one thing to say I managed the old shop because I was basically managing myself. The absentee owner, lovely guy Phil, he'd stop in, you know, here and there, but it was more or less on my shoulders. I'd usually have a Grom around for a background. La Jolla Surf Systems, whole different story. We had Angie Harp, just a wonderful woman, later married Rusty Kreisendorfer, and she was just a sweetheart. She was there before me, and she was the manager for the women's section. That alone was a big time deal. To have a women's section at a surf shop in the 80s was pretty much unheard of. So she managed that. I got recruited. I got to work with Jeff a lot, and then consequently Angie and I became fast friends, which we still are today. Hey, Angie, old time's sake. But yeah, I learned a lot from her. I learned a lot about buying and what it really took to run a surf shop myself, and obviously that came into play in my life further down the road. So yeah, I mean, the stories abound. What particular things you want me to talk about, Sean? Anything special?
Well, I'd love to kind of start at the beginning as far back as we can. So I know Angie had a big role, but can you tell me a little bit about Jeffrey Junkins and how the shop kind of first came to be?
Yeah, as I recall, again, Jeffrey Junkins was a wild man. We no longer have him, unfortunately, but he was a cut different than anybody I'd ever known. He had served extensive duties in Vietnam, where he had actually joined the service, and he did, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 stints in Vietnam in various capacities. Most of it he would never talk about. Sometimes it would come up. He was a decent surfer. He was a gnarly guy, very much an enforcer in the surfing industry, and he was no joke. You know, he called you out on something, and you better kowtow, or you better run, or accept a slap you might get in your face. Things were serious back then. But he was also very, very funny. He had great humor, and he was a moody guy. So if you catch him on the moody time, they're not saying much, walk away. You catch him on the jolly time, man, he would just have you in stitches on the ground. So over the year or two that I was there, I got to know him very well, got to see some of the flaws that he has, that we all have. He did like to take to the bottle a lot, and that got in the way to an extent. And then Helen was the calm, wonderful business person that she was. Quite different than Jeff. She had a beautiful young daughter who's all grown up now, and she was the soft side of the shop, and she had more of the financial assets to make that shop work. So it worked out fairly good, you know. I kind of calmed JLJ down because I didn't imbibe in things of that nature, and for me, it was such a big opportunity to be able to have such a complete surf shop that I didn't want to mess it up. I mean, it was my dream to always have something along that line. Until this day, I don't know, South Coast was right in that same realm. Eventually, I ended up joining posses with South Coast, but that's a tale for another day. It was a great gig for me. Money was fantastic compared to what I was making before. I could finally let go of working at Vaughn's and working at surf shops to try to make a living. And I got to focus my energy right there. Angie was, again, a sweetheart. We went through all the ups and downs that any small shop goes through, and it really developed into a pretty much kind of a worldwide phenomenon in some aspects. He was the first surf shop that I know of, at least in San Diego County, that ran regular advertising in magazines, big time ads, full-size page ads quite often, maybe not every month, but he did it often enough. He was a major influence on the radio stations, did quite a bit of surf forecasting. He was a very good photographer. He did articles for magazines. So it was a great way for me to further my career hanging out. And there's a million stories.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about the famous Proof is in the Pudding ad? I know that's one that's been quite legendary. It's been hailed as one of the most famous surf ads of all time. And if you look at the cast of characters that came through the shop, were portrayed in that ad, and even Art Brewer, who photographed that ad, it's timeless. Can you tell me a little bit about that photo shoot and about the guys that were in there? And
that photo shoot was an amazing experience to be part of it. It started off with JLJ's, suggestion, hey, I want to shoot this ad, Proof's in the Pudding. And we're all like, what do you mean? He goes, hey, we're going to get these guys together. We're going to go up to Art Brewer's session area, his studio, and we're going to dump a bunch of pudding on ourselves, and we're going to act stupid and smile and be just dummies, and then we'll design the ad around doing just that. So we got together with Tim Vassell, Gary McNabb, Sean Stussy, myself, Bill Castor, and in the corner, there was a little thing about Skippy, because Skippy wouldn't do it. It's all Skip Fry, gone fishing. So we get up to Art's, right, and I'm expecting, to have big buckets of pudding or whatnot. And no, they had like thousands of little tin cans that we all had to open up. You had to open these little tiny cans. You had to dump them on this big mat of plastic. I mean, that took freaking hours, Sean. I mean, it took so long to do it. But finally, we had just a whole bunch there, and that's basically what it was about. We just sat down in the pudding, stood up in it, did angels in it, threw it on each other, and Art just fired away. Crazy shots from all different angles. And eventually it came to play as a full-page spread that was really revolutionary because it drew so much attention. It was just basically some verbiage, and then the address of the Surf Systems with the iconic shell that they have for their logo, the Nautilus. And then it went wild. So, those guys were into different things. They liked to party, and once we got the shot done, Billy Castor and I, we split. I'd gone up with him. The surf was pumping. We went down the trestles. We jumped out, surfed some epic waves of trestles, trying to get that stuff, all that pudding out of my ears, my nostrils, and my hair, and my eyes. I mean, we were covered in the stuff. Look at the ad. It's silly, stupid. But we got a great surf in. We're walking across the trestles, coming back. The train caught us. We had to hold on to our boards, hang on to the trestle. We couldn't jump. It was too high. And I mean, we were like 6 inches away from that train. One of the scariest times of my entire life. And that was a very, very eventful situation. A couple years back, I got a call from Art Brewer, as a matter of fact. He goes, hey, Bird, what's up? I go, oh, not Art, what's up with you? Because you don't get a call from people like Art Brewer very often. He goes, hey, remember that ad we shot? And I go, yeah, duh. Everybody remembers that ad. He goes, oh, I want to send you down something from that. I went, yeah, whatever, Art. Wasn't expecting anything. And then, I don't know, within about a month or so, I got this giant tube in the mail. And when I opened it up, he had taken 2 or 3 of the shots that were not used in the ad. He'd blown them up into just these fantastic sized and papered prints that must have cost, I don't know how much, but I mean, they're full-on museum quality prints. And he did a little signage on them, dropped some names in it and the date, and he sent them down to me. I mean, I was speechless, like, Art, man, this is awesome. He goes, oh, thanks, just wanted to say hey and thinking about you. Within probably about a month to 2 months from that, he was gone. I had no idea. I knew he was hurting. I had no idea he was that far along. But that's kind of some of the stories that come to mind from that time frame and some of the things that I've been able to enjoy my whole life. But Surf Systems, it's a shining star in my eyes.
And obviously that cast of characters that you mentioned, I feel like that ad became more iconic over time. It kind of came out with a bang, it sounds like, but everybody had such a profound career that was featured in there and had such a contribution to the surf world. Do you feel like it really captured
captured kind of the era.
It captured the era, but it was the beginning of the era, right? So we're talking the early 80s. You know, things were starting to pop with crazy colors and things of that nature. But JLJ, as Jeff Junkins was always known as, he was always ahead of that curve, right? He wasn't afraid to push the boundaries. So that ad was radical, getting that many of those proficient of shapers. I mean, we had some of the very world's best right there in that one little combined compound, and getting us to do something as stupid as rolling around in pudding. That shows you kind of the tenacity and the imagination that JLJ had together. So I thought it kind of set the trend. I definitely think it was probably a milestone ad. You'd have to ask people smarter than me, but it's funny how most people still remember that ad. I actually have it in my shed, my little bird surf shed. There's a copy of us all standing there framed, and I've got one of the original La Jolla Surf Systems shirts hanging right from the picture. So not a day goes by that I don't look at that and I think of my fallen comrades, and all the guys are no longer in that picture. And I think of all the fun we had together. So yeah, I think it was iconic, if you want to use that term.
I mean, absolutely. And I was just looking at it at dinner last night and sharing it with a few folks. And it's interesting how everything in there is coming back full circle as far as style and colors and, you know, mustaches and, you know, just everybody's demeanor and the way, you know, everyone was portrayed themselves. And but like the boards, the style.
Boards. Yeah.
I mean,
well, JLJ was, like as I mentioned, forward thinking, right? So we had the casters, we did get some fries, had the McNabs. Everybody knew McNab from the thruster days of years earlier with Simon Anderson, but he brought down Stussy. And most people at that time knew nothing about Stussy. His clothing line was T-shirts, maybe at that, but he had a wicked board and he had a very good following with his design. So he brought a totally out of the area board company down, and we sold a crap load of them. You know, he brought in Channel Islands. We were, as far as I know, the first dealer to sell Channel Islands actively at that time. And look where that took off. Again, this is 80s, right? So we're talking 5 years ago, almost half a century ago. I had the honor to be able to start working with Al and the people up in that part of the world. Got to know those guys pretty darn well. Al was always great for me. Yeah, we had fantastic boards, equipment. Billabong, first people to sell Billabong. Gordon Merchant started Billabong with his wife. She would sew the products in her house, I guess. He'd slap them into a duffel bag, came over and showed JLJ, just trying to sell 5 pairs here, 10 pairs there, because they were like $5 more than Quicks. And everybody's all like, why would you want to buy something that was more than Quick and nobody knows what it is? And GLJ is because nobody's going to have it but us. So he bought like 120 pairs from that cat, which was like outrageous, because that's enough for usually 3 years worth of sales. You know, how many trunks were you going to sell in a year? 50 pair, maybe 60, I don't know. But we sold them out within a summer. And it was all because of GLJ pushing it, the new product line, and working with everybody that came on down the line. He never wanted to be last. And he really brought a lot of different companies to the forefront, and in such a professional manner that the shop just outshined most any other shop that was in town, really.
So I'm a few years younger than you, but I've heard that, you know, people would drive across the country to come to Surf Systems, or, you know, if anybody was in the area, that was the shop to check out. Now, how much of that would you attribute to, you know, the focus on surfboards and being an actual core shop versus just being close to the beach?
Well, again, you know, because it was so well stocked and it had such current, up-to-date, different merchandise, people flocked to it all the time. They'd be loyal to their local shops, but they couldn't help but want to go in La Jolla Surf Systems because it had everything. You know, most shops had this, they had that. Surf Systems had it all, the latest, the greatest, well-stocked, very well presented, great staff on the floor. You know, Angie just rocked hard, taking care of the women's section and the whole store as well. I did my part to do the best that I could. I basically focused on surfboards, as I still do today. but it was the experience, right? So if you're out in San Diego or anywhere near it, you've seen these ads, maybe you've heard it on the radios, people talk about it. We gave out millions of the Nautilus La Jolla Surf Systems stickers that you would find everywhere around the world in those days. So he really did a great job of early marketing any way that he could. Sometimes it was a little over the top, left maybe a little bad taste in the mouth of some people, but in general, he was always out just to push the brand, and at the same time, he wanted to push surfing. He really had a deep love and passion for surfing, and I'm hoping, that all that, comes right back in. I mean, Surf Systems is there. It's right now. It's time for that place to blow back up. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and watch its focus change and becoming more of a centerpiece of La Jolla like it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting for me to be able to kind of, help do some of the storytelling and help bring some of that back to life. It's really full circle, and the kind of quote unquote keep it in the family concept. And I know that the shop went through some changes, had a different owner eventually, and it kind of lost a little bit of what was near and dear as far as the core. What would you love to see happen with the shop?
Well, all businesses go through changes. When Jeff and Helen decided to part ways, and when the shop got turned over to the new owner that had it for, 20-some years maybe, he took a different track on it. His attention was more on the rentals, more on kayaking, more things of just more of a general kind of an ocean sport type of a shop, and the surfing aspect of it really fell by the wayside. I'd just like it to see it come back to the kind of institution that it was and can be, and focus more on the boards and everything else that it needs to have a complete shop. Things are different now, especially as we speak today with the closings of some of the big major companies. But you have to remember, back in the 80s, a lot of those major companies, i.e. Billabong, they weren't anybody. So there's going to be the opportunity out there for you, myself, other surf shops and people to pick up on some of the newer brands. Something goes down, something comes up. So I'm actually excited about where the future of the industry is now, and I know La Jolla Surf Systems will take the lead, in that particular area. And I'm not worried about quicking those guys. They're resilient, They'll find their feet. They'll come back again. Do they need to be as big as they were? Will they ever be that big again? I hope not. Sometimes growth is too much, and I think, they went too far out and kind of forgot more about where the core is. At the same time, there are smaller brands that are out there. Private label is huge. Out of Bird Surf Shed, the majority of the things we sell is just my branded merchandise, be it t-shirts and trunks, whatever else, because it's one of a kind, right? So it's the same thing with Surf Systems. They're going to, brand their logos up again. They're going to become a part of the community, and then the community will rally around you. In the 50-some years that I've been working at shops, owning shops, the community has never left me. They've always supported me, and I've gone through some dire times, more so than most people think. They walk in the shed, and it's a pretty trippy looking spot, and they're thinking, oh man, got it made. You never really have it made when you've got your own business, especially if you give from the heart like a lot of surf shops do. For me, it's never been about the money as much as it's been about the right boards for the right people. And I know, Sean, that you feel the same way. So I'm pretty confident you and crew can turn La Jolla Surf Systems back into what it needs to be, a great local surf shop that you can be proud of, and then watch it grow from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, stoked for that.
I'm very excited and very honored to, just be a part of this timeline. And I've had my surf school at La Jolla Shores for the last 8 years or so, and the opportunity presented itself to, what I want to say, restore the core and breathe some life back into the shop. And so we jumped on it. But of course, I went to the godfather of San Diego surf shops, and I said, hey, Bird, there's this opportunity. What are your thoughts on it? And, it's just a real honor to to get the nod. And
well, location. I mean, it's right down there. Avenida de la Playa, I believe, is the street. Do I
Correct,
still remember that right?
Yeah,
How's
absolutely.
that after 50 years? But I mean, it's right there. It's small, but it doesn't need to be big. It's not how much you have. Sometimes it's what you have, and then who is selling you and providing you with the right equipment. I just wouldn't call your school or your surf class lessons. It's a lot more than that, because you teach the etiquette. You teach everything that all the other type of on beach teachers should do. You learn the work and you learn to surf from the inside out. You start on the inside, you learn the fundamentals even before you get in the water. And you're always sharing that with your students, so they get a core value, more of what surfing is like and how much fun it can be. But they're going to walk away there with some knowledge about ties, etiquette, respect, being friendly, being supportive. So it's not just going out there and somebody's going to push your kids into the water for $50 an hour or a day or whatever it may be. They're going to walk away with a valuable education, and they're going to get the same thing out of your retail store. If you want to stay true to your roots, you don't have to have tons of stuff. Be very, very well educated. Know when to say that I don't know, because I do that all the time. I don't know everything about surfing ever. I learn from people every single day. I enjoy that. But if you don't know, don't say that you do. Be honest with people, and they're going to respect you for that. And with that respect comes lifelong customers and really a blessed life.
Right. Well, it's been just real full circle in the sense that, I bought my first surfboard from you, Bird, back in the day. It was a 5'4" used rusty Dylan Slater's old board that my older brother found for me upstairs at South Coast.
Yeah.
My older brother had his first board from you. It was a neon pink and green South Coast board that's hanging in Surf Systems now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
See, that's where the traditions all begin. I've gotten you some boards back lately.
Yeah.
I think we've exchanged some boards and put some of the boards in that I actually had sold out of South Coast out of La Jolla Surf Systems once upon a time. So, yeah, that's where the history begins.
Yeah. And as far as the idea of, bringing a surf shop back to shores, I feel like we had, for me, growing up, it was all about Rusty Board House, and I grew up working at Rusty Board House and working with Rusty. But our generation, like you said, it was kind of, a little bit hidden in plain sight, Surf Systems.
Yeah.
And then having, Board House is no longer at shores, and so we feel a bit of an obligation to, make sure that there's a surf shop in La Jolla Shores. It's the closest shop to the beach, out of not just closest surf shop, but closest shop. And like you said, the proximity and the location are just a part of that equation, but being able to, bring back surfboards, which is something that we've been working on clearing out the back, getting a lot of the rental stuff in another area, and making open board slips to start featuring, boards that, a lot of our surfers that graduate from our surf school come and they want their first board, so having approachable price point boards, looking to feature local shapers.
Yeah.
And then one question I have is, I know that JLJ like to get the Surf Systems logo on a lot of boards. Yeah. To the best of your knowledge, when was the last La Jolla Surf Systems surfboard made?
Well, that's a toughie, because once I got off that scene, when I left Surf Systems, I immediately opened my first store in La Jolla right up from Windansea, and that took the main amount of my focus. But I still remained friendly with JLJ up until the time that he passed. And I would say probably late 80s at least, probably a good solid 10 years or more of those boards being made. At first, we got the boards in and from different vendors, and we sold them. We'd like to see if they were accepted in the community. And if they were, then every board that came in, if JLJ owned it, or ordered it, it had to have La Jolla Surf Systems sticker on it. So there's laminates. So if you see any board from anybody that we've mentioned and it has the La Jolla Surf Systems laminate under the glass, that's a treasure right there, because it was handled by me or any one of the solid people that have worked for that store over the years, and it's a real piece of surfable, rideable San Diego history. So yeah, I mean, he had a good run with that logo. It was solid.
So tell me a little bit about the Nautilus logo. Is that a nod to the Nautilus Street there near Windansea, or is that something more? Do you know how that evolved?
No, I don't. I really don't. Back in the day, I probably had a speculative question on it once or twice, but for the life of me, I couldn't quite figure out, other than a Nautilus is associated with the ocean, and it's the curvature when you split it in half and you see it looks like a curl, right? It looks like this never-ending set of waves on it. So JLJ had a really artful mind. So whatever you saw in it, there was a purpose for it. He never did things randomly. He did crazy things, but they weren't random. He jumped into it hook, line, and sinker, and if it floated well, then he did good. If it sank, well, things sink. But for him, mostly things floated strong.
And obviously there's so much history and so many folks that have come through the shop that have a connection and a tie to the shop. As I start digging deeper with the goal of preserving some of this history and storytelling, who are some of the folks you think I should connect with next?
Oh man, just about everybody out of La Jolla, at least the Shores area, and most of La Jolla. I mean, from the kids that all started getting bored, Tommy Brewer. David Eggers rode for Rusty Surf Systems. I mean, there was people that rode for that shop that were some of the best surfers in San Diego, by bar none. Some of the best surfers in California. So there's plenty of people. And then all the other top dogs that associated with it as well. Some of the Windansea guys for sure. That's a whole nother story right there. So, I mean, you have basically an untapped source of future material just by picking off a couple of those guys, taking the time to sit down with them.
Well, that's something that's really important to me is, preserving the legacy. I wasn't there to see it all go down, but I know how important it is, and I know that some of these stories have probably already disappeared forever, and we want to capture some of these stories while we still have the chance, and to make sure they live in infamy. And I always hear different people coming through saying, hey, I used to bring JLJ avocados for, I guess there was a fish taco place next door.
Yes, there was.
Or, JLJ used to give me $1 to scrape wax off the boards. Brian Jennings was like, that was my first sponsor.
Yeah.
Just lots of folks have a connection to it.
Well, there's such, I could tell you a million stories about JLJ. There's crazy things. If you came into the shop, every once in a while he'd go, let me see your fingernails. You're like, what? Let me see your fingernails. And if you had any kind of dirt or crud underneath your fingernails, he'd send you home. If you got stuff underneath your fingernails, you haven't been surfing. If you're not surfing, I don't want you working here. So, he was just a gangbanger. You just never knew what he'd come up with. And again, he was a tough dog. He was a tough dog. Out in the water as well as dealing with vendors. Everybody loved him. They were afraid of him to a certain extent, but all the vendors were so stoked to come down and hang with him. Consequently, that's how I got to meet some of the best people I've known in the surf industry all these years, was the association with that shop. It has such high prestige. I was privy to that for the year or two that I was there, and that helped me down the line eventually when I was able to actually work with some of the companies that I'd been able to start working with at La Jolla Surf Systems. So the history is endlessly deep. Even though it hasn't been around as long as obviously Mitch's and Claremont and some other shops, probably it's the keystone. It's like one of the foundations of all the surf shops in San Diego in that positive, progressive way that the 80s brought out. Some people hate the 80s. not my favorite decade, but it was definitely interesting.
Well, very cool. It sounds like we're just scratching the surface, and I'm sure we can revisit this another time and pick up where we left off.
Anytime.
I don't want to take up too much of your time here on Tavarua Island, but I look forward to maybe sitting down with you once we get back to San Diego and digging up some other stories. And
yeah, I got some highlights. I got some great Bird and Angie stories we could share, because Angie, man, she was just the fire chief, man. She handled it all, and she is a tough old gal. Shouldn't say that, sorry, Angie. But she was. She ran the ship. She ran it tight. Taught me a whole bunch of different things. So I'm forever thankful to her. Hallie Sully Jones, Helen. She ran the place. That was basically her money and inspiration, along with JLJ. Leaders of business in the surf world at a time when women weren't as actively involved in that kind of an industry. They just brought on fashion sense, trends, and really good minds, smart minds. And that's another reason that place is such a legend. So it takes all of us. We're all in it together, Sean.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Bird, for your time and for everything, and for all the folks you inspire on the daily. Much appreciated.
Okay, brother. Let's go surf.
And that brings us to the end of our first episode of Surf Systems. Big thanks to Eric Bird Huffman for sitting down and sharing his stories. The kind of stories that remind us why places like La Jolla Surf Systems matter. They're more than just surf shops. They're meeting grounds, launch pads, and time capsules of surf culture. Bird's been a part of the system that keeps surfing alive, not just through the boards he's collected, the shops he's run, or the surfers he's influenced, but through the stories he passes down. And that's what we're here to do. Capture these memories before they disappear, document the past, and help these stories live on. If you enjoyed this episode, stay tuned. We've got plenty more stories to tell. We'll be talking to surfers, shapers, and industry pioneers who helped define the surf world through a connection with La Jolla Surf Systems, and the new generation who are keeping the legacy alive. Thanks for listening. See you in the water, and we'll catch you next time on Surf Systems.